Hello, everyone. My name is Pavlo Radchuk, and today I want to speak with you about debt security and how we think it should be done. I'm blockchain security lead at Hacken. I'm doing blockchain security stuff, starting from smart contract auditing and blockchain protocol reviews, finishing with debt reviews. And in past, I worked as application security engineer for web applications, and that's why I'm talking about debt security and the web aspects of debt security. So what today I will talk about is what is debt, how debts look like, what are debt vulnerabilities, what is the difference between smart contract audit and debt security review, and make a conclusion. So DEP is decentralized application. It's just some applications that backend code runs on some decentralized network. They can be not only blockchain ones. For example, uTorrent is still the biggest decentralized application. But in this presentation, I will limit only to Ethereum dApps built on Solidity smart contracts. So how dApps should look like, and what will they look like in 3019? It will be decentralized front-end, where HTML and all the scripts are stored in the Swarm or IPFS, and all the backend code is on smart contracts on the blockchain, and all the logic is on the blockchain as well. However, we don't live in 3019, and if you don't believe me, I've got some screenshots proving that. So first example is radar relay. If you try to access radar relay from Ukrainian IP address, you'll get this one. So radar relay is not available from your location. Smart contracts can define my location, so there is definitely some Node.js server or some Apache server which is filtering IP addresses and not allowing me to access the application. The next example is My Crypto Heroes. It's like one of the biggest games on the Ethereum, and if you look on the top, there is like a parameter. What it means? It means this parameter, it's transferred to some server and processed by the server. And it's potential input for a hacker. He can fuzz this parameter, he can attack this, and even if your smart contract is secure, he can find some web vulnerability. The next screenshot is our favorite CryptoKitties, and there is like registration form. It also processes parameters in URL, like UTM parameters, which are responsible for marketing. And when you register for CryptoKitties, there is like an email field. What does it mean? For classic dApps, like dApps in 3019, all the authorization should be done via Ethereum wallet. But here you need to have email address, and this email address should be stored somewhere in database, and it means that this application utilizes some database, and there can be SQL injection. So what we can see is that dApp in 2019 looks like backend on smart contracts on the blockchain, front end stored somewhere, it doesn't really matter where, and we've got middle end server, typically Node.js, where they can be different software, for example, user support software, marketing software, continuous integration services, some databases, and a lot of everything. And it's potential endpoints for hackers. So when it comes to security, most of people who develop dApps think about this one, but not thinking about middle end. Okay, so smart contract audit is the process when you're auditing a smart contract and you're finding all the vulnerabilities in smart contract logic, And the smart contract is the backend of the DApp, and definitely smart contract audit should be performed. It should be performed even twice, and as many times is better. And it's not protecting you from the attacks on users and web attacks. Okay. What we think should be done for most of the dApps is dApp security review. It's the project like security review, which includes the smart contract audit for the smart contracts, but also it models all the potential threats on web application, and it includes user security and the testing against web issues. And the scope of the dApp security review should be defined from the architecture. For example, if there is any SQL, there potentially can be SQL injection. If there is no SQL, there can be SQL injection. So what are typical vulnerabilities for dApps? What we researched that there are two most common vulnerabilities for dApps. First of them is XSS. XSS is cross-site scripting. It's the type of attack when malicious attacker can execute the script, the JavaScript in your browser without your confirmation or any actions from your side. And the second thing is server misconfiguration. It's like the class of security vulnerabilities related to unpatched software, default passwords, and all this stuff. But actually, as I said, there can be all the vulnerabilities from classic web, starting from SQL injection, broken authentication, XML external entity, everything from OWASP checklists and best practices. So I've prepared a small demo for XSS, and here is the backend code of the smart contract. It's pretty easy smart contract. So any address can call the setValue function and apply for KYC, and he will store some string, for example, company name in the blockchain, and then some authority can call getValue function and receive that text from the blockchain. And this contract is pretty secure, so there are no potential threats from the smart contract security side. But when it comes to the app, the implementation of the app for this KYC can have some vulnerabilities. So I've got the video demo where XSS becomes critical, and I'll describe what happens here. Okay, so it's KYC registration dApp. We've got one field where we can submit the company name. For example, it's hacking. We write to blockchain, execute transaction, and if admins check what is in this address, we get hacking. But for example, if attacker pastes the malicious JavaScript code here, executes transaction, and the admin won't see the name of the company, it's built HTML tag, which calls the web3 function send ether. And if admin of this ICO misclicks, then he will send all his ether to the attacker. And the potential of all these vulnerabilities, XSS can critical because you can try to call any function of any smart contract from the admin address. Okay, so that's why in classic web, the XSS vulnerability is typically medium or high severity, and we consider it is critical for blockchain dApps. Okay, the second most common vulnerability is server misconfiguration. There are a lot of examples of server misconfiguration And if you have a Node.js server, there can be not updated software, there can be default passwords for some SSH or some other software. There can be open.git folder, and when attacker access .git folder, he receives the full access to your repository. There can be some other stuff. For example, if you have keys in repository or some additional information, may also help attacker to execute some other vulnerabilities. There can be directory traversal, is a kind of attack when attacker can go through server folders and try to find something, some useful files, and he can access any file of the server, get access to all images, for example, get images for passports, for KYC of other users. There can be OpenS3 bucket if it's used, and you can also, with any Amazon account, access this bucket and get all the code from this bucket and use it for like reconnaissance and gain more knowledge about the application. And the pretty common case when DEP is not utilizing HTTPS, it's like nonsense. Okay, so the next example is unpatched Node.js. It's the vulnerability that was discovered in Node.js server, and it was discovered in June 2018, so it's pretty fresh. And if you are not updating your Node.js server, you potentially can be exploited via this vulnerability. And what actually all this info on the slide means. So all versions are vulnerable to this vulnerability, and the severity is high. The type of vulnerability is DOS. It's denial of service. So it means that if attacker sends specially crafted requests to your server goes down, and any legitimate user cannot connect, cannot send any request to the server. What means that your DEP is down. And it's much easier to put your Node.js server down than the whole Ethereum network. And even if your contracts are working, your front end can be down, and any user cannot use your DApp. And the impact of this vulnerability is high. Okay, so when we were looking onto these vulnerabilities, we thought, okay, we can do a mass scan for all the DApps. And we parsed the list of the domains for all DApps from different sources like DAppRadar. And there were like more than 2,000 of DApps that we analyzed. And we were looking to open.git folders and OpenS3 buckets. We had no results for open.git repository, so it's pretty good, and it's much better results than for classic web applications. However, when we did the mass scan for OpenS3 buckets, we found several applications with a big amount of users, like top 20 of the apps in Ethereum that has OpenS3 bucket. And we contacted all these teams. We said that, hello guys, you have OpenS3 bucket, so any guy can access to it and can read all the source code of your web application. And the responses were different. So some companies said that, okay, it's not a problem. Our web application code is also open sourced, and we don't care if you get access to our S3 bucket. And if you prove that it has any potential security impact, we will close it. Some others said that, okay, yes, it's minor, medium vulnerability, and we will fix that. So what I want to demonstrate with this presentation is that dApps are not that dApps that they're supposed to be. So they also have centralized servers, most of them. They got marketing software, they got all the classic web stuff. dApps also are not thinking about web security usually, and when they are doing security testing, they are limiting for smart contract audits. And the application with perfect smart contract can be also hacked. For example, like the demo with XSS. And what we recommend is to do security reviews instead of smart contract audits, because it covers both web security and smart contract security. So if you have any questions or any ideas about dApp security, let's talk about it. You can reach me in Twitter, you can reach me via email. Thanks everyone for attention, and we have several minutes for questions. Okay, zero.
Paul, thank you for your presentation. Tell me, please, what do you think the most difference between the classic web application and decentralized and web parts of a decentralized application in questions of web security? What do you think is the most difference between them?
Okay, so the main difference is the architecture and where the code actually executed. If we have classic web application, the code executed on like some centralized server, it's like PHP code or JavaScript code, and there can be their own vulnerabilities. So there are differences between JavaScript and PHP as well. And basically, the main stuff when testing the dApp, and if there is no server or a small part server just doing some proxying tasks, there can be XSS, and XSS severity is much higher than for web applications, classic ones, because we always get access to MetaMask and we can do everything. And the second thing is server misconfiguration. For penetration testing, the main classes of vulnerabilities are injections, are EthCC, and broken authentication. Thank you. And one question here.
A great talk. So my question is about, not necessarily about the dApps, but all the Ethereum nodes also expose a JSON RPC servers, right? So did you take a look at this, endpoints, and any thoughts about that? If it's like secure or?
Okay, so this is a different type of security reviews. It's like blockchain platform security, and we are doing this service for other blockchains. So we had like 2 requests for other blockchains for fuzzing API, for doing a network pen testing, but we are not actually doing this for Ethereum because it's like hacking. If we want to hack some server, we need to get approval from the company, and if it's like a lot of time of our team, it should be paid. So we are doing it like for other projects.
Thank you very much for your great talk. Are you thinking about working with big framework companies like OWASP to provide maybe a framework for blockchain security analysis and the apps?
Yes, of course. So OWASP framework, there is like OWASP ASVS, it's Application Security Verification Standard, and there is 17 sections that you should cover when you're doing pen tests. And when we doing pen tests, we cover all of them. But when we do depth security, there are two parts. First part is smart contract audit, and the second part is web application security. And we define dependence on architecture, what section from OWASP testing guide and OWASP ASVS are applicable for this application, and we cover them. Okay, thanks everyone. You can find me.